The first time Nia Harper realized adults didn't always believe children, she was standing in front of the class holding a model of the solar system her father helped her build. She was only 10, but she had that quiet kind of confidence that comes from being raised by someone who loves what they do and makes you believe you can love anything with the same intensity. Nia loved space, not because it was pretty or mysterious, but because it made sense to her. Stars didn't lie. Orbits didn't bend just because someone doubted them. Physics didn't care if you were a little black girl from a quiet neighborhood with more questions than answers. The universe ran on rules, and rules made her feel safe. Her classmates, however, lived in a world where truth was optional, and imagination was suspicious when it came from someone like her. But everything changed the moment she said one sentence that the wrong people decided she wasn't allowed to say. It happened during show and tell. The easy part of childhood, the part where everyone holds up their favorite object and explains why it matters. A boy brought a toy car, a girl brought a doll. Someone else brought a half-eaten bag of chips and somehow stretched that into a story. Then it was Nia's turn. She held up her model, wires, painted foam planets, tiny LEDs glowing like distant suns. It was the kind of thing most kids' parents bought from a store, but hers was handmade, clean, precise, every detail placed with the care of someone who understood what it represented. "My dad and I built this together," she said softly. "He designed Spacecrafts, and that was it, that one line, that tiny truth, the sentence that cost her more than she expected." A boy in the back snickered. Another rolled his eyes. Someone whispered something under their breath, and the rest giggled like they'd all agreed she'd just told a fairy tale. Nia paused. Not because she doubted herself, but because she didn't understand why they doubted her. It wasn't until she looked up at her teacher that she felt the real blow. Her teacher didn't laugh, but she didn't believe her either. Nia recognized the look instantly. She'd seen it before, that soft, polite expression adults used when they didn't want to call a child a liar, but also didn't want to entertain the possibility that the child might actually be telling the truth. "Your dad designs spacecrafts," the teacher repeated slowly. "Yes," Nia said. "For real." And there it was, a tiny pause. A small, heavy silence that said everything no one was bold enough to say out loud. The kind of silence black children learn to read before they learn to multiply. And in that silence she learned the first rule of being young, black, and brilliant. Your truth is always treated like exaggeration. The class moved on. But Nia kept replaying the moment in her head. Not the laughing, not the whispers, the disbelief. Because disbelief feels different when it's directed at you for reasons you can't name yet, but you can feel in your bones. Later that day at recess, one girl walked up to her and said, "If your dad designs spaceships, why don't you live in a mansion?" Another chimed in, "Yeah, people who work with NASA are rich." Nia didn't know how to explain aerospace engineering salaries to children who still believed chocolate milk came from brown cows. She just shrugged and said, "He works a lot." That only made them laugh harder. Kids don't need evidence to bully you. They only need a story that makes them feel bigger than you. And right now, the story was simple. Nia was lying. Not because her truth didn't make sense, but because it made too much sense for a girl they didn't expect it from. Before we continue, if you love stories that uncover the small battles nobody talks about, take 1 second to subscribe. It helps the channel grow and it ensures you never miss the next chapter of stories, just like this one. Because what happens next is the moment Nia realizes disbelief spreads faster than truth, especially when you look like her. Back in class, the teacher gathered the students on the carpet for a group reading session. Nia sat in the front, knees pulled to her chest, staring at the floor. She could feel the glances hitting her from behind. Little smirks, little snorts, little reminders that she had said something people decided she wasn't allowed to say. It didn't matter that she'd seen her dad's blueprints. Didn't matter that she'd visited his lab. Didn't matter that she'd held a titanium prototype in her hand once, too heavy for her to lift without using both arms. Truth doesn't protect you when people have already made up their minds. Near the end of the day, her teacher approached her quietly, kneeling next to her desk as if about to offer advice rather than doubt. "Nia," she said gently, Sometimes when we tell stories, it's easy to get carried away. Next time, let's try to keep things realistic, okay? Realistic. The word dug into Nia like a thorn. She hadn't made anything up. She hadn't exaggerated. She hadn't even bragged. She told the truth. And the truth had been treated like imagination. But the part that hurts isn't being called a liar. It's realizing nobody ever thought your truth was possible in the first place. That night, at the dinner table, her father noticed she wasn't her usual self. She pushed her food around, didn't talk about her day, didn't ask her usual questions about stars exploding or planets forming. Something in her spirit felt dented, not broken, just bent, subtly, quietly, the way young black curiosity bends when the world pushes down on it too early. Her father looked at her and asked, "Nia, what happened?" And she whispered, "They didn't believe me." She didn't need to explain what they meant, or what believe meant. He understood instantly, because he'd lived it. And the worst part wasn't that her classmates didn't believe her, it was that her teacher didn't either. But what Nia doesn't know yet is that this moment, the disbelief, the silence, the doubt, is only the beginning of the lesson her father is about to teach the entire room. For the rest of that week, the air around Nia changed. Quietly at first, then sharply, the way cold creeps in before you realize winter has arrived. It began the next morning. She walked into class holding her usual astronomy book, a thick, glossy one filled with pictures of nebulae and star clusters. But this time, she didn't place it proudly on her desk. She kept it inside her backpack, zipped shut, hidden. Not because she didn't love it anymore, but because she didn't want to give her classmates anything else to laugh at. When disbelief becomes the air you breathe, even truth starts to feel like something you should hide. During group work, the same kids who joked about her the day before kept staring at her, whispering, not loud enough for the teacher to hear, just loud enough for her to know she was the subject. She heard one boy say, "Why would her dad work on spaceships? They don't hire people like that." Another replied, "She just wants attention." Nia lowered her head, pretending she didn't hear. But kids can always tell when the room has decided it doesn't believe them. It's like a shift in gravity. Everything feels heavier. At lunch, the whispers followed her like shadows. At recess, she sat on the swings alone, dragging her shoes through the dirt. She watched two girls reenact the moment she'd said her father designed spacecrafts, exaggerating her voice like it were a joke. One even mimicked the teacher's sure, sweetie smile. That hurt more than anything. Because when adults don't protect the truth, kids learn to disrespect it. By the end of the day, the laughter wasn't even about her dad anymore. It was about her. Her voice, her confidence, her belief that she belonged in conversations bigger than cartoons and playground drama. It wasn't the lie they mocked. It was her audacity to believe she could speak a truth that didn't fit their worldview. Then came the moment that shaped the rest of her week. Just before dismissal, her teacher pulled her aside. Not angry, not harsh. Worse, gentle. "Nia," she said softly, "you're such a bright girl, but sometimes when we want people to like us, we say things that sound bigger than they really are." Nia froze. She knew exactly what the teacher meant, and it cut deeper because it sounded like kindness. Her voice wobbled. "But it's true." The teacher nodded with a look that pretended to understand but didn't. "Well, I won't call you a liar," she whispered, "but you need to be careful about making up stories. It can cause problems. Problems. As if telling the truth was a disruption, as if being proud of her father was a disturbance. Nia walked out of the classroom feeling something she had never felt before. Not sadness, not embarrassment, but a cold, quiet shrinking. The kind black children learn too early. Be smaller so the room feels bigger. But shrinking yourself isn't silence, it's survival, until someone notices you're disappearing. At home, her father, Dr. Malik Harper, noticed immediately. He always noticed. She didn't rush to his home office like usual, didn't beg to see what he was working on, didn't ask if he'd teach her something new. Instead, she headed straight to her room and closed the door. That wasn't like her, not even on her worst days. Malik stood in the hallway for a moment, listening to the quiet. Quiet in a child's room is rarely peace. It's containment. He knocked gently. "Nia, you okay?" A soft came through the door, but parents know a lie by tone alone. He opened the door slowly and found her curled up on the bed, staring at the model they built, the same one she proudly showcased 2 days ago. Now it sat in the corner like something she regretted touching. "Talk to me," he said, sitting beside her. Her throat tightened. "They don't believe me," she whispered. "Nobody believed me." Malik's chest tightened, not with anger, but with recognition. He had lived this. In college, in work meetings, in boardrooms where he had to introduce himself with his credentials before people would look him in the eye. The disbelief that followed him into adulthood had now found his daughter. Before this story goes deeper, if you've ever felt ignored, doubted, or dismissed for telling the truth, hit that subscribe button. These stories matter, and your support makes sure more people hear them. Because the moment a black child realizes their truth needs permission, something inside them breaks, and something inside their parent wakes up. For the rest of the week, the changes in Nia were small but obvious. She stopped raising her hand, stopped volunteering answers she used to know instantly, stopped carrying her space-themed lunchbox. She used her plain one instead. She didn't want stars on anything anymore. During independent reading time, she kept her astronomy book closed, even though she was on her favorite chapter about exoplanets. And when the teacher asked the class to write a paragraph about what they wanted to be when they grew up, Nia didn't write astrophysicist like she planned. She wrote nothing, just stared at the blank page until the bell rang. Because disbelief doesn't just silence you. It rewrites your future before you get the chance to write it yourself. By Friday, her father had seen enough. She was quieter, dimmer, dulled in a way that scared him, because he knew exactly where that road led. One evening, when he tucked her into bed, she finally cracked. "Daddy," she whispered, "why don't they think people like us can do things like you do?" Malik paused. It was the kind of question no parent wants their child to learn this early, yet every black parent knows they eventually will. He took a breath, carefully choosing each word. "Some people don't understand what we're capable of," he said softly, "and because they can't imagine it, they assume it isn't real." Nia swallowed. "But it is real." "I know," he said, "and I'm going to help them understand that." She looked up, confused. "How?" Malik gave her a small, steady smile. "Career day." And in that moment, the story shifts, because disbelief is loud until truth walks into the room wearing a badge no one can argue with. Career day at Brookwood Elementary was usually simple. A few parents, a firefighter, a nurse, someone's uncle who owned a car wash. The school didn't expect anything extraordinary, certainly nothing world-shifting. But when Dr. Malik Harper stepped out of his car that morning, adjusting his neatly pressed suit and clutching the presentation bag he'd packed at 2 a.m., he wasn't coming to impress them. He was coming for his daughter. He walked through the hallway with the quiet confidence of a man who'd been underestimated enough times to build his own backbone. Teachers glanced at him with polite curiosity, trying to guess which student he belonged to. Nobody guessed Nia. Why would they? She was the quiet girl, the one shrinking in her chair all week, the one who told stories. But that's the thing about truth. It doesn't need to shout. It just needs the right moment to walk in. Inside the classroom, the kids were buzzing with excitement. They loved Career Day. It was a break from routine, an excuse to ask questions, to hear grown-ups talk about jobs they barely understood. Nia sat at her desk, twisting her fingers under the table. She didn't know her dad was coming. Malik wanted it that way. He wanted the moment to hit her heart fresh. When the door opened and he stepped inside, the room fell instantly quiet, not out of respect, but confusion. He didn't look like the parents who usually visited. He carried himself differently, straight back, deliberate, calm without being timid. The teacher blinked, surprised. "Oh, hello. You must be." He gave a small smile. "I'm Dr. Malik Harper. I'm here for Career Day." The teacher froze, not out of recognition but realization. Nia looked up so fast her chair squeaked. Her dad nodded at her, a small reassuring gesture that said, "I'm here. I see you." The teacher cleared her throat, suddenly flustered. "Oh, I didn't realize. Please, go ahead." Because the moment a room realizes its assumptions are wrong, the atmosphere shifts. Malik connected his laptop to the projector without saying a word. The silence in the room was thick, kids whispering, "That's Nia's dad?" No way. "He looks like important." Then he spoke. "Good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Harper. I'm an aerospace systems engineer in the Deep Space Navigation Division. The class went silent. The exact title they'd mocked Nia for, the exact words they insisted were impossible. He continued, voice steady, deliberate, practiced, not for arrogance, but clarity. The clarity of a man who'd had to prove himself every step of his career. My job involves designing components that help spacecraft travel far beyond Earth, sometimes millions of miles away. The teacher's eyes widened. She glanced at Nia, then back at him, as if trying to reconcile two versions of reality, one she believed and one she dismissed. Malik opened his laptop. Projected onto the screen were 3D models of propulsion systems, control units, and deep space probe schematics, the exact images Nia described days ago, the ones the class laughed at. And suddenly the lie they accused her of wasn't just true, it was irrefutable. He zoomed in on a detailed blueprint of a thruster. This is one of the components my team and I designed. It's currently attached to a probe that's traveling beyond Mars. A few kids gasped. One boy whispered, "That's real? Like real?" Malik nodded. "Very real. Spaceflight doesn't wait for disbelief." He showed videos of launch simulations, clips of spacecraft assembly lines, and internal views of engines firing during testing. Every second, the room sank deeper into awe. But awe wasn't the only thing settling in. There was shame creeping in quietly, especially in the children who had been loudest in their doubt, especially in the teacher who had gently scolded Nia for making things up. Malik wasn't here to humiliate anyone, but the truth had its own way of teaching. If you're feeling this moment, if you've ever wished someone would walk in and make the world see you, hit that subscribe button. Stories like this deserve to be seen, and your support helps them travel further than any spacecraft. He switched slides. On the screen appeared something familiar to one person in the room, a sketch of a probe with its solar panels extended, one Nia had drawn in her notebook weeks earlier. Malik said, "This is one of my daughter's favorite designs. She's been learning about thrust vectors and solar arrays." The room turned to Nia again, but this time not with mockery, with recognition. Her shoulders lifted slightly, the first time in days. Because sometimes a parent isn't there to save you. They're there to restore the version of you the world tried to steal. The teacher cleared her throat again, her voice small. "Dr. Harper, this is extraordinary." Malik didn't look at her. He wasn't there for her validation. His eyes stayed on Nia. He finished the presentation with a final slide, a photograph of him standing beside the spacecraft component he helped design. "I do this work because I believe the sky should not belong to only a few, and I teach my daughter everything I know because she deserves to believe she can reach beyond it." The words landed heavily, not loud, not boastful, just truth, clean, unfiltered, undeniable, a truth they had refused to believe from a child, but swallowed whole from a man. And that's the painful reality. Sometimes your truth isn't accepted until it comes from someone the room thinks is worthy. When he finished, the room erupted with questions. Suddenly, every kid wanted to know everything about rockets, Mars, gravity, and engines. They treated Malik like he was some kind of celebrity. But Nia? She sat still, not smiling, not glowing, just watching. Watching how quickly disbelief turned into admiration the moment an adult with credentials walked in. Watching how easily her truth had been dismissed until it came packaged in authority. The teacher approached Malik with trembling enthusiasm. "Dr. Harper, thank you. I had no idea." He nodded politely, but inside he knew exactly what she meant. She had no idea that a black man could carry credentials stronger than her assumptions. The room finally believed him, but belief wasn't the victory. The victory was Nia seeing her truth stand taller than their doubt. As the class applauded and crowded around her father, Malik glanced at Nia again. Not with pride, with understanding, because he knew the hardest part wasn't proving the truth. It was everything it cost her before this moment. The classroom empties in a hurry, buzzing like someone just witnessed a celebrity cameo. And in a way, they did. Only it wasn't the celebrity they expected. Kids surround Dr. Malik Harper like he's the first black scientist they've ever seen in real life. They touch his laptop, point at the rotating spacecraft model on his screen, ask him questions they never thought to ask Nia. But Nia isn't smiling. Because admiration that shows up after evidence never feels like admiration. It feels like a delayed apology wrapped in excitement. But here's the part that makes this moment hit even deeper. Nia doesn't want their sudden acceptance. She wants to know why they doubted her in the first place. Her teacher, Mrs. Kendall, approaches awkwardly like she's walking into her own guilt. "I owe you an apology, Nia," she says, voice small, careful. But even her apology feels like a performance meant for the parent standing behind Nia, not the child in front of her. Dr. Harper accepts it politely. Nia just nods. Because what else is a 10-year-old supposed to do? Correct her teacher's tone? As they walk out of the classroom, Malik places a hand on his daughter's shoulder, but he can feel it. She's not relieved. She's tight, holding something in her chest like a knot she doesn't know how to untie. "Ready to go home, Starshine?" he asks. "Yeah," she whispers, but her voice is heavy. They walk in silence through the hallway, echoing footsteps. White walls decorated with posters about honesty, kindness, and believing in yourself. All the things adults preach, but don't always practice when the child in question is black. Nia finally breaks the silence when they reach the parking lot. "Daddy, why didn't they believe me?" It's not an angry question. It's a wounded one. The kind of question a parent prays they'll never hear, but knows eventually they will. Malik exhales slowly. He's answered versions of this question for colleagues, professors, and supervisors. He never imagined he'd answer it for his daughter before she even turns 11. He opens the passenger door for her, waits until she settles in, then kneels so they're eye level. "Because some people," he says softly, "only believe greatness when it comes from the mouths they're used to hearing it from." Nia frowns, "But I wasn't lying." "I know," he says, "and you shouldn't have needed proof." His voice cracks slightly on that last word, not enough for her to notice, but enough for him to feel. They ride home through soft afternoon light. Nia stares out the window, watching the world blur by, wondering how many other kids get told their truth is too big. How many other classrooms don't think brilliance lives in bodies like hers? At a red light, Malik glances over at her. "Can I tell you a secret?" he says. She turns, curious. "When I first became an engineer, people doubted me too. Colleagues, supervisors, even neighbours. It's not your fault they couldn't imagine this life for us." "So it's them?" she asks. "It's their imagination," he answers, "and their imagination is too small." Nia looks down at her hands. She's quiet again, but not the same quiet she had in school. This one feels like thinking, processing, growing. If you're still watching this and these moments are hitting deep, take 1 second to hit subscribe. Stories like this deserve to be heard, and I don't want you to miss the next one. Now let's finish Nia's story, because the real change happens next. At home, Nia goes straight to her room. Not to hide, but to pull something from under her bed. The big binder where she kept all the sketches and diagrams she stopped bringing to school. Pages and pages of stars, rockets, and propulsion systems she learned from her dad. Things she pushed aside because someone told her they weren't believable. Malik watches from the doorway. "Thought you stopped working on those," he says gently. "I stopped showing them," she replies. "I didn't stop knowing them." And that sentence tells him everything. This wasn't about rockets. It was about being silenced. But here's the moment the whole story pivots. The moment where a child who was doubted learns the one lesson she should have never had to learn this early. Nia sits cross-legged on the floor, looks up at her father and asks, "Do I have to prove everything I say just because I'm black?" It hits him like a punch to the chest. Because the answer is complicated, painful, and he can't lie to her. He sits beside her. "No," he says, "but some people will expect you to. Not because you're wrong, but because they're limited." She waits. She wants more. Malik continues, "Your voice is not too big. Their imagination is too small. Don't shrink for anyone." His voice is calm, but you can hear the fire underneath. A fire built from years of being doubted, questioned, underestimated, and now he's trying to hand her the armor he had to build by himself. The next day at school, Nia walks into class, not loud, not triumphant, but steady. Certain. Present in her own skin. She sits down, opens her notebook, and raises her hand. The room falls quiet, expecting her to hesitate, but she doesn't, because the point was never about being right. It was about understanding something that will follow her for the rest of her life. She doesn't owe anyone proof to exist loudly. That's the lesson she learned. The one she shouldn't have needed, but the one she's strong enough to carry. And as the camera fades out, the message lands with the weight it deserves. Some truths don't need validation, some brilliance doesn't need permission, and some children shine, even when the world refuses to believe they can.